It's a funny old conference, this. It's the one that the Lib Dems thought they wouldn't be having. They thought there'd be an autumn election round about now, and they did have plans to do away with the thing altogether or boil it down to a rally, and a rally is kind of what we've ended up with. And as you were saying, they've got something to celebrate. The 72 MPs exceeding their own expectations, and they're thrilled with that. But what's interesting here is how they got to 72 MPs. They focused absolutely relentlessly on a few issues where Lib Dem interests overlap with swing voters in swing seats interests. And that meant they talked incessantly about sewage spills, about social care, but it's left some people around this conference scratching their heads and wondering, well, what about everything else that we're supposed to believe in, the stuff that made us join the party? And also, where is this party in this new post-24 election world going to position itself in the future? People around the leader are saying you've got to wait and see where the Tories go, see how the whole canvas develops. But at the moment, it feels a bit like a sort of pudding that hasn't quite set, this party. But they're a very happy bunch, as you say, celebrating like crazy. So much about a party conference is. But this Liberal Democrat conference is unusually cheerful.
Bouncy. Buzzing.
Buoyant.
Jubilant. Energised.
Fantastic.
The Lib Dems' 72 MPs are proclaimed everywhere you go.
In Parliament, I can't even go to the toilet without bumping into a Lib Dem. It's true. Anyway, now we have 72. What are we going to do with them?
And that is a bigger question that's unresolved. Sir Ed Davey added to his photo stunt album Yoked to a Sussex Windmill. He led the rigorous on-message campaign, sticking to issues where Lib Dem concerns overlapped with target, often older voters' concerns in Tory seats. Issues like sewage spills and social care.
Social care. That's the reform above all reforms that the NHS needs.
You ruthlessly targeted swing voters in swing seats and talked about virtually nothing else in the campaign apart from the things that rock those particular voters.
Yes,
and in the process we might have lost sight a bit of what the party's for.
Well, I think it is up to us now to define a broader agenda. And the electoral system is stupid, and obviously we would replace it with a fairer one that means people don't have to distort their message, if you like. What I think we've done is to learn to use the system to give us a platform. We're a much stronger we are the third party again. We have a much stronger voice in Parliament. We represent far more communities. We can use that platform to broaden out the debate.
Ed Davey was kind of doing an exercise a bit like Keir Starmer in that election we just had, trying to shrink the size of the target on his back, wasn't he? And now you're faced with working out what you're all there for, 72.
I think that the Liberal Democrats will succeed over the course of the 5 years in carving out a distinct liberal identity, which perhaps you're right in saying was a little opaque at the last election as they forced a sort of session of mini local contests on the ground.
Behind the scenes, you hear the party's top figures talk of how MPs should concentrate on digging in at their new constituencies. And the party should wait to see what the Tories do next before deciding its own strategy for this Parliament.
Digging in because we properly represent constituents, and I think that's really, really important.
But the mission beyond digging in, holding on to what you have, hoping to get more seats, the mission beyond that, people scratch their heads a bit. It's work in progress, isn't it?
I don't accept that it's work in progress.
I think Lib Dems always have to an extent, wait and see what the other parties do and what the lie of the land is. That's sort of sensible, and it's the way of life for Lib Dems. They can't sort of change the political weather on their own. They have to look at what the situation is and work out how to adapt. That means sometimes they're forced to be a bit more tactical than in an ideal world they'd like to be.
I've had a technical problem, and I've just managed to delete my whole speech. 2 seconds. There we are. Imagine putting a speech about electoral reform and trash.
The party renewed its backing for electoral reform. Many want to hear a stronger pro-EU line before too long.
The Monday Club. The Monday Group. The Monday Group, yeah. Monday Club.
But Ed Davey isn't under pressure yet on these fronts, as his party basks in boosted numbers in Parliament, which they know owes much to his strategy.
Danny,
Well, a little earlier I caught up with the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey, and I began by asking him about the NHS. So Ed Davey, you've talked about fighting to fix the NHS. So can I take it from that in extremis you're prepared to vote against the budget if the government doesn't put more money into the NHS urgently?
Yes.
And that's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I mean, we fought the general election on NHS and care. It was our top priority. It was our top spending proposal. We had an affordable costed budget for investing in primary care, in social care, in repairing our crumbling hospital buildings. And we're calling on the government to make the budget on October the 30th a budget for NHS and care.
And higher taxes to pay for that. You're upfront about that.
Yeah, we've said that they should reverse the tax cuts that the Conservatives gave to the big banks. We've also talked about capital gains tax reform, which is paid by the wealthiest and the billionaires. So we said in the general election, I'm repeating that frankly, there was ways of raising the money so you could get that investment in our NHS and care.
You'll work with Labour, you'll sit down and talk to them as soon as the conference season is over about how to fix social care?
Well, I hope they're prepared to work with the opposition parties. I mean, our style as to be a much better opposition than Conservatives is to be constructive and prepared to work cross-party. However, when it comes to things like properly investing in the NHS, we're hearing from the government they want to do reform before they invest. Liberal Democrats want to invest and reform.
So is it the government that's your main target, or is it the opposition? Because you've talked about finishing the job, defeating the Conservatives. Are the Tories the bigger target for you, really?
The Conservatives don't share our values. Indeed, increasingly, what's quite dramatic in our politics is I think lifelong Conservative voters have drifted from the Conservatives because they no longer share the values of those people. Things like the rule of law, law and order, compassionate politics, decency in politics. The Conservatives have moved away and people have looked to us in many of the seats we've won, in seats we could win in the future, as the real owners of those values, that most adhere to them.
Where your policies, where you set out your policies at the moment, they're to the left of Labour. So, for example, on immigration, you talk about wanting new safe routes for asylum seekers. You want more money for the NHS and higher taxes to pay for it. You oppose means testing the winter fuel allowance. You want to scrap the two-child benefit limit. I mean, how many Tory voters are going to be attracted by these kind of policies?
Huge numbers. And I think I disagree with your characterisation of this being left and right. Look at the NHS and care. I don't think that's a left-right issue, actually. When we talk to lifelong Conservative voters, they agree with us on NHS.
Wanting higher taxes? Wanting capital gains taxes higher?
I think the vast majority of Conservative voters would be willing to pay that price.
And a lot of Conservatives in southern England, where you won seats, would love to rejoin the EU. You mentioned it as a kind of footnote in your manifesto. When are you going to be more confident? Use that, that amazing victory you've been talking about as a launch pad to say, yes, let's rejoin the EU.
Well, I'm glad you raised Europe because it's an issue that we're passionate about because, as you know, we are passionately pro-European.
You've got a funny way of showing it, though.
Well, let me show you a little bit more now. First of all, it is good that the new government is prepared to talk to our European colleagues and try to rebuild that relationship. That's a big improvement on the Conservatives. I also think we need to say loud and clear that our objective is to rejoin the single market.
But I'm not hearing you say you want to rejoin the EU, yes, in the distant future sometime, but you passionately believe in the UK being in the EU. I'm not hearing that.
Yeah, well, what I'm saying is we're passionately pro-European, and the way to do that, if you're a responsible politician, is to rebuild that trust.
I'm definitely not hearing how brilliant it is if the UK was to rejoin the EU.
Kathy, you know that we opposed the Brexit deal.
Yeah, but you can't shout about that because you're worried about these Tory voters and, who you're trying to appeal to who might not want to rejoin the EU.
Isn't that an interesting thing? I met lots of Conservative voters who actually think Brexit hasn't worked very well. I met a lot of Conservative voters who didn't vote for Brexit.
So you think it's a vote winner, potentially, rejoining the EU?
Well, but being pro-European and showing a responsible way to mend our relationship with Europe is, I think, a vote winner.
You arrived here on a jet ski. I mean, does your heart ever sink when your comms guys say you've got to get into another wetsuit?
Oh, no. I have to get up.
You love a wetsuit.
I say, look, is it a day for a dry suit or a wetsuit?
What's the next stunt then? Show a bit of leg on the next stunt.
Well, what I will say is in the general election, one or two stunt ideas were rejected. One was rejected because, if you're being interviewed underwater, the microphones don't work.
So it was a scuba diving stunt that was rejected?
Well, you know, I think some of our opponents wanted me to swim the sharks, and we weren't just going to do that.
So Ed Davey, thanks very much.
Thank you.